It never ceases to amaze us that archaeologists are still making major discoveries about human history. We've had all these years to dig into the ground and research the ways of our ancestors, and yet it seems like we've still barely scratched the surface. Incredible archaeological discoveries are still made all the time, all over the world. In celebration of that fact, we've put some of the very best recent examples together for you in this video. The history of human settlement on the Americas has become a hotly debated issue in recent years, and the discovery made in July 2020 in Mexico has pushed the date of human arrival on the land back by around 15,000 years. There could be no debate that our distant ancestors were living in Chiquijite Cave in the north of the country 30,000 years ago. They left almost 2,000 stone tools behind for archaeologists to remember them by. The sheer volume of tools, along with other artifacts found at the site, has prompted historians to compare the cave to a kind of prehistoric hotel, where large numbers of humans lived together for short periods of time. This is bad news for the existing theory that the Clovis people were the first organized civilization in the Americas, though. Whoever these cave people were, they had the Clovis people beaten by several millennia. In fact, by the time the Clovis people arrived, it's likely that this mysterious civilization had long since vanished. The site of the cave is difficult to reach, but offers a panoramic view of the surrounding area. That would have made it ideal as a primitive defensive fortress. It looks like July was a good month for significant archaeological discoveries, because in the same month the artifacts in Mexico were found, an enormous ancient storage facility was located in Jerusalem. Excavations have been carried out in the vicinity of Arnona inside the remains of a large structure made of ashlar walls, within which there were more than 100 jar handles, all of which bore ancient Hebrew inscriptions on their seals. The majority of the handles read LMLK, an abbreviation that identifies them as the property of the king. But there are also the names of 3 long-lost Judean cities. The studies carried out by the team working there indicate that the center was in use approximately 2,700 years ago, during the time of King Hezekiah and King Menashe, both of whom are mentioned in the Old Testament. Some form of government activity appears to have been carried out at the site, including the collection and determination of taxes on goods, like olive oil and wine. People still had to pay their taxes even back then. A small collection of clay figurines was also dug out of the ground, which might indicate pagan ceremonial use of the building in pre-biblical times. Abu Dhabi is full of precious jewels and stones these days, but most of them belong to the extremely wealthy people who live there. The presence of precious stones on the land is nothing new, though. In fact, during October 2019, the world's oldest pearl was found on Marwa Island, just off Abu Dhabi's coast. The tiny, slightly pink pearl has been dated to approximately 8,000 years ago and has been taken by historians as evidence that the precious stones were traded as valuable commodities even in Neolithic times. It seems that our ancient ancestors were as enthusiastic about elegant accessories as we are today. It's likely that the stones were used as jewelry, but would also probably have been used as commodities with which to trade for ceramics and other goods from Mesopotamia. The pearl is the most significant find made so far at the site, but Marwa Island has also recently given up a set of shell beads, arrowheads made from flint, and many beautiful ceramics. All of the goods recently went on display as part of Abu Dhabi's 10,000 Years of Luxury exhibition in the Abu Dhabi Louvre. The more we find out about the Ellora caves of Virul in India, the more amazing they become. We think of multiculturalism as being a relatively modern concept, but the caves are providing increasing amounts of evidence that worshippers from many different faiths were happily living and working side by side as long ago as the 6th century, and remained there for a minimum of 400 years. There are 34 different beautifully carved monuments in and around the caves, including religious buildings and decorations belonging to the Buddhists, Hindu, and Jain faiths. A construction project this large probably wouldn't even be considered today. It's too large, and the cost would be astronomical. Added together, the human-made elements of the cave system cover an area of more than 1 square mile. This is an incredible example of human beings working together despite their differences in ancient times, and perhaps one that we can all still learn from today. Despite everything we've been able to see from the site, we're yet to find out who started the work here, or why it appears to have been spontaneously abandoned after so many years of use. As the police know very well, you can train a dog to seek out almost anything using its incredible sense of smell. Archaeologists working in Croatia last year have even proved that with enough time and effort, a dog can even be trained to sniff out an Iron Age tomb. The dog-assisted research team has been looking for Iron Age settlements in the country's Velebit Mountains and came up trumps when their canine friends led them to a series of burial chests containing human remains and personal effects. It's thought that the burial chests form part of an ancient necropolis close to the former fort of Drevisica, which dates back almost 3,000 years. Curiously, the crates don't contain the full skeletal remains of the deceased. Instead, they contain smaller bones, such as the fingers or feet. Scientists don't know what the people of the time did with the rest of the bodies of their loved ones, or why these particular bones were selected for ceremonial burial. Sadly, that's one question that the dogs can't help them with. Nobody knows for sure how long human beings have kept animals as pets, but a recent set of discoveries in Egypt confirms that the practice has been going on for at least 5,000 years. Unfortunately, it appears that the pets of the time didn't always live happy lives. The remains of many exotic animals have been found close to Hierakonpolis, an ancient Egyptian ceremony, and so it's likely they were buried close to their owners after they passed away. Based on the injuries and marks on the remains of the animals, which include hippos, crocodiles, baboons, and even elephants, it appears that they were probably sacrificed after their owner passed away, so they could join them in the afterlife. Even more gruesomely, some of the bones show the telltale signs of injuries that occurred long before death, which suggests, unsurprisingly, that keeping a hippo under control in a domestic environment was sometimes a violent occupation. Keeping an exotic animal is thought to have been a status symbol in ancient Egypt, in the same way that owning an expensive car would be today. A remarkable discovery in Russia during 2018 has shed new light on the way that people with physical disabilities were treated in the country many thousands of years ago. And it might surprise you to hear that they were treated very well. In fact, based on the number of riches and ornaments discovered with the two boys, it might be the case that 34,000 years ago, people with visible physical deformities were looked upon as gods. The children went to their graves surrounded by deer antlers, works of art, ivory beads, and spears. Far more grave goods than those found in the adult graves around them at the site of the Sunghir burials. In Stone Age times, these items would have been viewed as riches beyond measure. Analysis of the skeletons shows that one of the boys would have been unusually short and bowed, and the other was almost undoubtedly bedridden for his whole life. The two boys would have been aged between 10 and 12 when they passed away. Curiously, each of them had a human calf bone placed on their chest when they were committed to the ground. The reasoning behind that strange practice will likely never be understood. Our next discovery is a gruesome one and tells us a sad story about medicine in Europe during the Dark Ages. In March 2019, the skeleton of a 7th century woman was found in Bologna, Italy. She'd been buried in a traditional brick coffin facing the right way up, but further investigation revealed a hole in her skull, and, disturbingly, the skeletal remains of a fetus below her pelvis. Further examination revealed that she was around 30 when she died, and the fetus was around 38 weeks old. The hole in her head is likely from trepanation, which would have been intended to help her cope with a medical ailment she suffered from during her pregnancy. As well intended as the process may have been, It's highly possible it was responsible for her death. As for the fetus remains, there are only two possibilities. One is that it was a coffin birth, where built-up gases inside the decomposing body expel an incomplete fetus after death. The other is that she wasn't quite as dead as she appeared to be when she was buried. Let's not think too hard about that second option. Returning to Egypt, one of the most stunning ancient Egyptian discoveries in recent years was made during October 2019, when no fewer than 20 ancient wooden sarcophagi were found in the Asasif necropolis, which was once part of the mighty ancient Egyptian city of Thebes. The coffins, which were found stacked in two carefully arranged layers, are remarkable for two reasons. Firstly, they're in astonishing condition considering the fact that they're around 3,500 years old. And secondly, they still possess most of their original coloring. Inside, the mummies of the deceased were also perfectly preserved. Judging by the inscriptions on the sides of the sarcophagi, it seems that this was a burial ground for deceased priests, which explains why they were interred with a degree of ceremony and respect. This is the first large-scale coffin discovery in the country since the end of the 19th century, and raises the possibility that there might still be more to find in the country, despite the fact that it's one of the most dug up and excavated places on the planet. 30 different pottery workshops have also been found nearby, although so far, there's a curious lack of temples for the priests to work in. Sometimes, amazing archaeological discoveries hide in plain sight. Nero's palace in Rome, known as Domus Aureae, or the Golden House, is a famous building, and yet in 2019, it was found to contain hidden depths. Ongoing restoration work unearthed the existence of another large room beneath all of the previously identified chambers, and within it, works of art that have been untouched since the 1st century. The new chamber has been named the Sphinx Room because of the large painting of a sphinx on its walls, but there are also renditions of centaurs, panthers, other animals, and human figures painted there too, most of which are picked out in striking shades of ochre and red. The ancient Roman god Pan appears on the murals also, making music for all the centaurs to dance to. One reason the room might have gone undetected until now is that the palace was mostly filled in with dirt and debris after Nero's death. The emperor was unpopular among his own people during his life, and once he was gone, there were efforts made to vandalize and destroy many of the buildings he created. Stonehenge, the famous stone circle in Wiltshire, England, is known throughout the world as a major prehistoric archaeological site. We know it was built around 5,000 years ago, but we have no idea what it was used for. Some people insist that it's an astronomical calendar, while others say it was a site for pagan worship. Perhaps it was both of those things at once, or maybe we've been asking the wrong question. A recent radar survey of the site has revealed that Stonehenge isn't alone in its Wiltshire field. It's surrounded by a collection of hundreds of different prehistoric shafts and megalithic structures that are invisible to the naked eye, but have left traces in the ground. The shafts take the form of a circle that's almost 2 miles wide, encompassing not only Stonehenge, but also the Durrington Walls Henge and Woodhenge. Instead of being an individual area of interest, Stonehenge may have been an important focal point in a much more extensive network of structures that can only be understood when viewed together. We still don't know the significance of the whole site yet, but we may now finally be getting closer to finding out its real purpose. If you're in love, you might carry around a keepsake that reminds you of that special person in your life at all times. One typical example might be a heart-shaped pendant that you wear around your neck. We know of an ancient French noblewoman who went one step further with that idea. When Louis de Quengo passed away in 1656 at the age of 65, she was buried in her leather shoes and her favorite cloak in a well-marked grave. A couple of years ago, when she was exhumed, scientists found out that wasn't all she was buried with. In her coffin, placed on her chest, was a small heart-shaped container. Inside that container was the heart of her husband, who'd passed away 7 years earlier than Louise. The organs of important or influential people are known to have been removed posthumously in France of the time, but this is the first time we found evidence of a human heart buried with a spouse. The rest of Louise's husband, Toussaint de Purien, is buried more than 100 miles away from Louise's grave. We suppose this is romantic, even if it is a little grisly. Subscribe to the channel, turn on the notification bell, and enjoy watching new videos on my channel. Thanks for watching, and see you soon!